The journey is conversations with ordinary people about stories of transformation and how we may have had setbacks in our life and how we persevered through those, how we've learned from those obstacles, and how they've maybe helped us on our path today. So, Ryan Curry, welcome to the journey. I appreciate you being here this morning. I know we just met about a month ago and at another fundraiser. And let me just share a little bit about what the journey is about. And essentially, the journey is just an opportunity to have individuals come on and tell their stories about how maybe they've had something that they've struggled with, something that some setbacks in their life, something that either could be some type of trauma, or it could be through mental illness or addiction, or maybe it was just that they were trying to transform their life and recreate themselves. Sure. And I know that what a little bit I know about you, I know you have a story, and so. But before we jump into all that and you telling your story, why don't you share a little bit about who you are as a person? But what do you do? What do you do for fun? If you have fun, what do you do?
Oh, geez. I'm a dad, so
okay. How old are your kids?
One will be 16 next month. Another will be 12 or 11 next month, and youngest is 7. So
okay.
Yeah, it's
so high school, middle school, and grade school. Okay,
soon to be middle school. Yeah. So I love hanging out with them. Okay. I'm a homebody. Okay. So a lot of my life is family oriented now. Sure. I do the things like play fantasy football, and I go on Sundays over to a buddy's house and we watch football every Sunday. A lifelong friend, so there are things like that. But I'm a homebody. I like being home. So
and being with it, and then the kids are what ages? You said what ages, but are boys?
All girls.
All girls.
Oh,
hello.
Yeah. So, and my wife wants to have another.
Oh, okay.
And I'm health. I don't have the best health, so it's always been a debate. Like, I love kids. Like, I see younger ones, and I just I gravitate toward it. I just want to pick up babies and play all day. But at what point is my body just done?
Sure.
And she's not. So
now your wife's name is Liz, right?
Yes.
And how long have you guys been together? How long have you been married?
We've been married only a year and a half.
Okay.
Been together almost 9 years.
Oh, so, okay. All right.
Yeah.
And what does she do? What does she do for a living?
She works for a family business, so she does billing for remodeling, handyman type Oxford remodeling. Okay. And then she works for a friend that has a book reveal club, so she does that also on the side.
Okay. So it sounds like she's busy too.
And puts up with me. So
And 3 girls.
Yes, and 3 girls.
And all the things that change it.
Yeah, she's definitely the glue, as everybody would say. The example. She keeps us together. My mind goes a million places, so I'm traveling and doing speaking events or sometimes comedy or acting, and I'm all over the place. And every time I text her and say, hey, this, all she says, I'm proud of you, I'm happy for you, this is awesome. Like, she's so supportive. It's nice. Whereas my mind, I'm like, oh really, this is what you're doing now? Whereas most people would. She's not like that at all. She's just extremely supportive. So
nice. And how'd you guys meet?
So her dad owns a local pub, Oscar's, and so I'd go in there when we'll talk about my darker time. Revolved around the bar a lot, but so her dad actually introduced us, not thinking we would ever date, but it's all worked out for the better, and now everything's come full circle, and everybody's just loving life and happy family. So
nice. Now, are you from the Rockford area?
I was born and raised in Belvedere.
Okay. All right. Yep. And then went to high school in Belvedere?
I did.
And that would have been Belvedere, BHS then? Belvedere
this is, I'm old. It's before these schools were built. New schools. It was a nice, quiet, quaint town. Now it's like a metropolis.
It's a whole lot different now, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is, yeah.
So we'll have to talk later, because Dalton is the head wrestling coach for the Belvedere Co-op. And so he was the first head coach of when they brought both schools together for the
No
co-op.
kidding.
So I've found myself back learning more about Belvedere again, and spending more time in Belvedere. But so now, when you were in high school or middle school, did you do extracurriculars? Were you involved with sports or performing arts or anything like that?
My dad was a wrestler, so he told me, he's like, you're going to wrestle or play football. You're going to play a contact sport. And he was adamant about it.
Okay.
And so I'm like, all right, I didn't want to wrestle. That was his thing. He was state champ back in 1938 or something. I'm just so I played football in junior high, and I remember I was safety, and I took a punt return, and I ran it back about 50 yards against Harlem High School, and it hit me so hard that I vowed I was never going to play that game again, and I didn't. I was done. I finished the season, but I didn't want to play that game again. It hurt. I was done. So I played golf and tennis and baseball. So I played baseball throughout.
So baseball throughout, and then also golf and tennis.
Yeah, and they shared seasons, so it was always kind of in between. We'd boycott, high school baseball, and we go play tennis. And, and then I played BYB, and then I loved it.
Okay, so your dad was a wrestler.
He was.
And when do you remember when he graduated? What year?
I don't. I'm guessing it had to be 78.
Okay, so late 70s or something like that. Okay.
Yep.
And so he was a big time wrestler. Did you say he won state championship?
Yeah. No, actually, if he was born in 50, he was probably more like 72, 73.
Okay.
But yeah, he was state
champion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know in our family, wrestling's a big thing, and none of us in our family went down, did as well as that.
Yeah.
But it still was. It was just part of the culture. If you're a wrestler, it's just part of what you do. And I know for us that in football, we continued following that even after we were done playing or anything. But what'd your dad do for a living?
He went to college and became a phone man. So he worked for GTE and CDC, and then when they bought out, merged with Frontier, and Frontier turned into Verizon, and it kind of bounced around. So he did that for almost 30 years before his spine said no more. He had a few back surgeries, got in a bad vehicle accident while he was working, and no more climbing poles and digging holes for him. He was done. So he retired after 30 years in, and he's what we say failed at retirement, because he's up every morning. He's still at Steam Plant Restaurant eating breakfast with the phone company guys, and then he's cleaning the church and mowing 4 different lawns and taking care of my grandma, and he's busier than I am, and I try to stay full time as much as possible. So
sure. I just had the conversation with someone yesterday about the concept of retirement, and what if you don't plan for it, a couple different not so necessarily good things happen.
Oh no,
you either completely go down and it consumes you, or you just get busier than you were before, but you don't even know what you're busy doing.
You have to transition purposes, is what I always preach when I speak. Is purposes. When I lost purpose is when I lost myself, and I just went down that dark path. If you have a purpose and you have a goal and an agenda and a schedule, then life is very manageable and you can be happy. But when you lose that purpose, a lot of people's purpose is that work life, that 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 job, and when that stops, you become this person that feels like they're not giving back, especially this typical, they call them baby boomers or boomers, and I hate that term, but they were raised a lot differently, whereas they started working at 13 years old, and you didn't, you know what I mean? And they're just very strong-willed people, very, very work ethic, work-oriented, generation, which is awesome because I got to learn from that. So
right, I very much believe with what you just said about this idea of needing to know what your why is, what your purpose is.
Yeah.
And I just did a talk just recently about, and the main point is that if you know what your why is, you can endure almost anyhow.
Yeah.
And that was a quote. I believe it was Viktor Frankl that originally came up with that phrase. So I know. So we can get into your story because part of how I got to know you a little bit was that you were a veteran and you had mentioned you were in the Marine Corps, and so when did that happen and why the Marine Corps and tell us a little bit about that.
I had grandparents that were all in every branch, so Marine Corps, Navy, and Army. And then an uncle was in Air Force. But I met my best friend, Jim Gosnell. He's another Belvedere guy. We met junior high, and he was just like me. We were what you'd call ADD now. You know what I mean? We were just all over the place. They'd medicate us like crazy right now. But then we just... you embraced it. You had fun. We were adventurous. We were out doing obstacle courses, and he decided Marine Corps, and he's like, dude, let's join together. So from about sophomore year on, all we did was want to do that, and that never changed throughout our entire high school career. I mean, we knew we wanted to join the Marine Corps. So we on my 17th birthday, I raised my right hand up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and at the MEP station up there, because you had to be 17, and my parents signed for me, and we both left for boot camp July '98.
Okay, all right. Yeah. And so you graduated in May of '98, right?
Yeah.
And then in July you were at boot camp.
Yeah.
And part of picking the Marine Corps was I'm assuming part of it was just because your buddy wanted to. Was there any other reasons other than that? Why that branch other than the other branches?
Sure, it's got that stereotype of being the toughest. It's the 13-week boot camp. It's a longer boot camp. It's a very strenuous boot camp. And if I do something, I've always wanted to go all in. I always wanted to kind of take the toughest path. It's always been in my nature, just to say I accomplished it. But we just and there's every video you see the Marine Corps, they're coming out of the water and they've got cami paint on, and they get these crazy looking rifles, and it fascinated me, and I was extremely interested in doing it, and he shared that interest. So we did what you call the buddy program, which is really bad because he looked a little bit like me. So you get in there and you get a drill instructor that knows two guys came in the buddy program. I mean, they thrashed us nonstop. We got strong real quick. So, yeah.
So yeah, tell us a little bit about that experience of the early part of that, and then so '98. Okay, so that would have been pre 9/11. So then things shifted. They were already building before that, but then they dramatically shifted in the early 2000s. So tell us what it was like pre 9/11 and then post 9/11.
Sure. So when I joined in, I went in as amphibious assault. I drove the big floating tanks. Was my job. One of my deals my parents had was you're not going infantry. They thought for some reason that's where the guys with rocks in their brains went. And they wanted me to do something that I could use when I got out. Not sure what I would use driving amphibious tanks around unless I'm driving ducks up at the Dells. So Gosnell went infantry, and I get to this unit. I do my schooling, and Gosnell calls me one day. We're both in Camp Lejeune now. We're over on the East Coast, and so we get to stay together this whole time. He's a mile down the road. And he's like, "Hey, I just took the indoc for the Special Forces." He's like, "You got to do it." Normally, if you're not infantry, you don't even get that chance, or you wouldn't be expected to take that chance, or that opportunity to take the indoc. So I asked my platoon sergeant. He laughed at me. No. So I waited another week, and I approached him again, and it's like, this is something I really want to do. And he said he'd ask around, and it kind of died off again. And then I just started really working at it. So while everybody else is kind of out partying, like I threw a ruck on my back, and put 50 pounds in it, and I ran nonstop. And I would train. And when they're driving out after work past the barracks and they see me out there training nonstop, they knew I was really serious about it. So they signed my orders to go take the indoc. And out of 33 of us, only 3 of us passed the indoc that I was in. So I get orders to come back. I come back to my unit and I'm like, hey, I made it. They're offering me to come go into the platoon, which is the indoctrination platoon. So you go through 3 months RIP and then you go up to Amphibious Reconnaissance School, ARS. They denied my orders. They weren't going to let me go.
Your home platoon.
Yeah. Okay. They're like, oh, that's great that you passed and we're happy for you, but we kind of need numbers here and we're about to go on a float out to a Mediterranean float out to the Med. And I was pissed. I was mad. I was like, I've been training this. This is what I want to do. This was in my mind. My buddy's there. Like, this is what's going to happen. So I requested mass. And requesting mass means you do the paperwork to jump chains of command, and you get to someone that really can make that decision without. By bypassing, the gunny who's going to
friends, right?
Yeah, they were really happy. The funny part is I had to go 2 months before that. I went on a meritorious board, and my gunny's like, when you walk in front of this board, and what you do is you walk into this room, and it's like a panel of higher ups, officers and enlisted that are way above my pay grade, and you report to them. He's like, you walk in there and you slam the door. That's an attention gainer. Their heads will raise up and then they'll know you're in there. Well, I did this, and 2 of his pictures fell off the wall and broke, and he kicked me out of the office. Didn't even get to answer a question. Didn't get promoted. And this is the guy now I'm going to go in front of to ask if I can, diddy mile out and go to the SEDAC. So I went in there and he said no. So I went back to my unit and requested mass above his head to the division commander. And about a week later, I got called back up into that sergeant major's office, and he told me to basically pack my stuff and go. He signed my orders. So, so I checked in with Gosnell. The cool thing about Recon, which is our version, the Marine Corps' version of Special Forces, we got Recon, Force Recon at that time. Now it's MARSOC and Raider Battalion. But everybody lives to train. I mean, they're there by choice. So there's a lot of people that join the military and they're bummed out that they're there. They regret, so they just kind of go through their 4 years. So when you go into Recon, everybody just lived to train. I mean, you go through your pipeline where you're going to airborne school and combatant dive school. The Marine Corps Recon is the only rarity where you can go to combatant dive school. And SEER school and all these cool, things that you see in the posters. Now I was living those poster dreams.
Sure.
And then it turns out that Gosnell is in my team.
Okay.
So this guy, I get roomed up with a guy named Nick Walsh, Saul Carrillo, and Jim Gosnell. Okay. And we roomed throughout, and that was our team, our group.
The 4 of you guys.
The 4 of us.
Okay.
Yeah. And we spent majority of our time together. Okay. And then even when they'd go to different platoons and stuff like that, we all just were together, no matter what. And we got to go see the world. It was awesome, but it was intense. And then September 11th happened. We were all we're training like any other day. And I was down in the S4 office, and there's big box TVs, because this is so long ago. The news comes on, and we're just watching, and then we knew life was about to change, because we weren't just an average unit. We were, people that I'll explain a little bit. Job of reconnaissance is to jump in the middle of the night or insert into a hostile area undetected and take as much intel without being detected, and then reporting that back so that units can come in. Okay. So our job is to sneak in, blend among the people. I mean, that's not always. Sometimes it's to take out a target as well, or to take high value targets back with us, or capture targets. So recon is and we're amphibious reconnaissance, so we insert by water most of the time. And
gotcha.
And so it's okay. So it's a really exciting job. Sure. It's a fun job. Sure. It's very extreme, and I loved it. But so 9/11 happens. We get put on lockdown. Nobody's allowed to leave the base. Things changed drastically from then. To get on base, it'd take you an hour, because they had to check everybody's vehicles, and where you could just normally drive on base, they saw that sticker in the window they waved you through. Security lockdown, crazy.
Sure, how about?
And it changed drastically on base. Life on base was a lot different. But even then, I didn't deploy yet. I I decided to wait out a couple years, and nothing happened. My unit didn't go. A couple of the other units went, because it's not just one unit. That's a battalion, so there's many companies in there, and my company wasn't going to deploy, and I had a girlfriend back home. I'm like, I'm just getting out. I'm done. I'm not going to play the game anymore. So Gosnell got out too, since we joined together. So we got out. Walsh and Carrillo stayed in, and we lived in Gosnell's mom's basement. We had our girlfriends, and life was mundane, to say the least. And I joined, so I got bored with life and joined a unit up in Madison with Brandon Ramey, who's a local Belvedere guy, and whose mom was a close family friend of ours too. So I'd known Ramey for years, and him and I would drive up there every month and train. And then that unit was supposed to deploy, so I'm like, all right, I'll deploy with them. And then they didn't. Then they're supposed to deploy again, and then they didn't. So I'm like, again, we're going to play this game. So I got out again. And then they did deploy, and Ramey got killed. So after Ramey died, I had this kind of weird vengeance. I was irritated with the world. And I'm saying maybe 3 months after, maybe longer, 6 months after, I got a phone call. It's like, hey, we're getting the band back together. Do you want to go do a deployment in Fallujah?
The four of you guys.
Well, there would be in different places. It'd be Gosnell is already over and hit at this time, place in Iraq. So we're going to be basically together, but with different units. So, but back in Iraq. Gotcha. So I'm going to go.
So just to make sure that I understand.
Yeah.
Because when you say you're out, that means you're not in the Marine Corps anymore, or you're not, I guess I'm not really understanding.
I'm in this weird IR, is what they call it, inactive reserves, where you have about 4 years that you're obligated. So in the Marine Corps, when you join active duty, you do 4 years active, 4 years inactive reserves. So when I went to Madison, I just re-enlisted into a reserve unit, did a year contract, and then I got out.
Oh, I see.
And then I got a call from a buddy, and he's like, hey, do you want to go to Fallujah?
Gotcha.
So I said, yeah.
Okay.
So over there, I got hired to lead a scout team, and my job in there was to take 2 vehicles ahead of a convoy a main body convoy, and look for IEDs and any threat. So if it's an ambush threat, my job is to eliminate that threat before the convoy gets there, halt the convoy, eliminate the threat, and then push through. My job was to basically provide security for the convoy. And a lot of times you find IEDs by hitting them. They hide them really well. Sometimes they'll be in a tire. Well, my job is to drive up next to that tire and look inside that tire. Because if I pass that tire and it blows up the convoy, I just failed at my job. So my job was not a fun job. I mean, it was basically looking in every hole in the road, and half the time you look down in it, that's when they go off. So I got hit a lot, and within I want to say the 7 months I was there, but within the last month I had 7 concussions just from blasts alone, 6 from IEDs, and then 1 from a RPG that hit my door that didn't go off. Thank God. So I got beat up pretty good over there. And what I didn't know is the more I was taking these concussions, the slower my mind was getting, my reaction, where it was noticeable to others, I thought I was okay. So I'd gotten hit really hard on my birthday, August 22nd. I'll never forget it. I begged to go back out on a mission. I was getting stir crazy because I'd gotten blown up 2 days before that, and they made me stay back in the rear just to kind of gather my thoughts. And we're just going to run down to BIOP, and I had, we call it the Walmart, because they had this store down there that you could go buy a bunch of stuff. And I was like, I want to buy some stuff, take home with me. We're leaving in a month, so I mean it's easy street now, right? And we take this back route behind Abu Ghraib. Everybody talks about Abu G, the prison over there. And as we're sitting back there, I had a 7-ton actually go in front of me, which is a big armored vehicle, just because it's a new route and it can take a lot more blasts than I could in this little Humvee. So I had him lead the route. I'd go behind him. And he notices something up above and halts the convoy. So it's that vehicle and my vehicle, and then the main body convoy is 2,000 meters behind me. They stayed way back. And then we had 2 ghost vehicles that went behind them. And as I look to the right, I see this RPG coming right at me. And there's nothing that I'm going to do. I'm going to brace for, impact. And the way the blasting cap must have hit my door, because an RPG is what I was told has to hit pretty direct. And it hit at an angle because it was up top, came down and hit where it glided and then ignite, and then it actually detonated underneath my door. So it caused concussion, and it knocked me out, but it should have killed me, and all of us, really.
Sure.
So we got lucky. So we rig for tow. We get back. I have to sit now. I think it's like 8 days it was August 31st before I got to go back out.
So 2 concussions in 2 days.
Yeah. No, I mean, they were very close.
Yeah.
So then I take my little leave, my time off, and August 31st, 30th or 31st, I forget now, but we have a short mission. We're going to drive from our base in Fallujah through the city of Fallujah in the middle of the night up to Al Taqaddum, this TQ, this air base. Done it 100 times. And we're driving through there, and I see it's after curfew, and I see these headlights coming out of this alleyway, and I'm like, it's after curfew, and I can see shadows running in front of the headlights, so I'm like, something's not right. So I halt our vehicle. I tell my driver, stop, we're gonna check this out. And as I'm getting out, it goes off. We're parked on a triple stack of 155. So artillery shell in 155 has a kill radius outside of a vehicle of 105 meters. Now we're parked on top of 3 of them under our engine block, and they ignite as I'm stepping out of the vehicle. So all I feel is warmth. I feel totally disoriented. I come to in panic. I'm laying on the road. I remember just not being able to breathe because all the dust from the blast. I'm wiping what I thought was sweat out of my eyes, my ears. I feel like I'm sweating all over. That I'd later find out that I'm bleeding out of every hole in my face. And then I'm peppered full of shrapnel on my legs and my side. But I come to and I'm walking down the road. Like, I think I'm back home. Like, I have no idea what's going on. I'm totally confused. And I wake up to, I can hear my captain screaming in my ear, Curry, what's going on? And that's what I come back to. And, it's a wong, wong, wong. Everything's just slow motion and just this, my head's pounding. But my adrenaline's going so much that I run back to my vehicle, and now we get in a 45-minute firefight, which is great for us because 9 times out of 10 when the enemy blows you up, they run. You never get to engage the enemy. So it's really frustrating. So we rig up a little V formation, we take cover, and then we return fire on a building to our right where the gentlemen were first seen. And then we call QRF, Quick React Force. They insert in the building and they start clearing floors. And we do a rig for tow, and they take my vehicle up to TQ and get us to they medevac me to the hospital, 4 of us. Excuse me. Once I get there, I'll never forget, an Air Force doctor is standing there and tells me to take off all my clothes. I walked in on my own. I jokingly say, "Will you marry me?" We have this. I'm okay. I'm not hurting that bad. And then everything starts slowing down. My adrenaline starts slowing down. I slip into shock. I've lost a lot of blood, and the pain starts coming in. And then I realized, maybe my injuries are a little bit worse than I had at first thought.
Sure.
So they medevac me into a base in Balad, Baghdad. They work on me there, keep me basically in a coma for about a week because of the swelling on my brain, and medevac me to Germany, then out to Maryland, and I spent 7 months in the hospital out in Bethesda, Maryland. My functions from my brain to my hands, where I couldn't tie my shoes, all these signals that I'm trying to tell my body to do and my hands to do, they weren't working. And since then, basically, all I have is memory issues that, as far as brain. And anything comes with a traumatic brain injury. The impulse, all that fun stuff. But so after I get out, I get an apartment by myself, and I'm like, I'm good to go. I don't need anybody. I'm good. I get this apartment. I'm thinking I'm out of the military now, and I get a call like 2 months after I had this apartment. And they're like, Curry, where are you? And I'm like, first of all, who is this? This is Staff Sergeant from Joliet. He's like, you're still in the Marine Corps. I'm like, what do you mean I'm in the Marine Corps? They'd never discharged me. So I had to spend another 7 months on medical hold out in Joliet that was transitioning into the Special Forces. So what I did is I went out to Joliet and helped transition those guys to go to ARS and lived in a Ramada out there and until they finally discharged me. Meanwhile, I skipped a big part. While we're there,
in Joliet or out east?
No, out east. Walsh gets shot by a sniper. So our team of 4 that we talk to nonstop is he gets shot in the neck by a sniper and killed. Which Gosnell and I are able to go to basically fly home and go to the funeral. He had a wife and two little boys. And I didn't deal with any of that. I just kind of, I hurt at the time, but just kind of tucked it away. I didn't deal with it. I still had Gosnell and Carrillo, who we talked every day, and life was okay. I'd help them out as much as possible, but I didn't let it affect me, or didn't think it did. So we go back to living in Gosnell's basement. We're back to square one. We're living in the bars and drinking and just being reckless, getting in fights. What I thought I was okay with, I wasn't going to any of my appointments for the VA. I felt my brain injury was completely manageable. I destroyed relationships. I made a complete fool of myself. The people that I cared about, I took advantage of, I guess, in a way, or didn't really care. I wouldn't say take advantage of, but I didn't care, or I was extreme. Like if I had a girlfriend, as I loved so extreme that, you know what I mean, I was jealous nonstop and just controlling, not the person I was prior, and just not a good person to who I wanted to be. I know that at that point in life something had to change. Either I was gonna die a miserable drunk, or something drastically had to change. But I had no out. I had no, I'd gone through a divorce while I was out the first time. I didn't see much of my daughter. I wasn't a good dad. It wasn't that I was subject her to anything. I just wasn't there enough.
Wasn't present.
I'd allow her mom to say, hey, you can have her for 2 hours instead of pushing for 4 or 6. I was okay with that. And I shouldn't have been.
So you weren't fighting to be with her?
I was not. No.
And back then, that was before. If I'm following in the story, that was before a lot of the traumatic head injuries.
Yes.
And so, why do you think at that time? Why do you think you were emotionally unavailable then?
I don't know. It switched. It's like a chemical change in my body where I just shut off. It just wasn't there. It wasn't that I wanted to. It's like people say they go to a funeral, they have to force themselves to cry or feel emotion. I felt guilty for not feeling emotion. And I still struggle with that today. Or extreme and too much emotion, like with the controlling in a relationship. And I just wasn't a good person.
Now, did you start noticing those extremes, right, of no emotion, and then the other end of extreme emotion? Was that always there, or was that after you got out the first time, or after the head injuries, or when did you notice the severity of that?
So I was an emotional kid. I had a tough my dad raised me as the best he could. My mom and him divorced, and I lived with my dad full time. My mom dated some abusive guys. I just went through a lot, and so that I'd kept into, and I was emotional. I think I acted out because of that. So coming into the military probably wasn't, without helping my own mind prior, probably didn't help. But I noticed that I didn't care when I came out. So it didn't matter whether I noticed. I can't tell you if I noticed the separation from my mind emotionally at a certain time. I just knew that if I did, I made an excuse for it.
Sure.
It's and that's the thing veterans do that drive me crazy. We all have an excuse to act a certain way. That doesn't mean you don't take responsibility for those actions. Yeah. And that's something accountability is huge for me. And I'm still not perfect. I still make mistakes all the time in that regard. But I just knew that the person I was I would have kicked my own butt if this self of me would have, and it just wasn't a good role model to my daughter. It just wasn't who I wanted to be. And now I'm representing the military. They just gave me this Purple Heart. They're praising me, and then I'm out at the bar acting like a fool, and that's how I'm representing the military now. And I knew that just wasn't good, or who I wanted to be.
Right.
So Gosnell gets married, and I meet Liz I'm at the bar, and I dated many people at the bar. So her dad, when I first started dating Liz, he was not happy. Like we didn't talk for 5 years. I mean, he was, and I see why. Like, I get it.
Didn't trust that you.
No, and he had no reason to.
Sure.
He had no reason to. I'd given him no reason to trust that I would make good decisions with his daughter, and she at the time had a 2-year-old whose father accidentally overdosed on opioids. So I met her, and she basically gave me the ultimatum, like, either you're going to not live this life anymore, and you can be in our life with my daughter, and I'll let you, or you can keep acting like a jerk and making a name for yourself that's deserving, all the judgment in the world.
Sure.
And I chose them, and they chose me. So I felt happy, and my life changed from that. She gave me that ultimatum, and that's what changed everything.
So let's go. There's a lot of stuff up until that were going on, until you and Liz got to that point in your relationship where she says, "Wait a second, if this is going to be long term, things are going to have to be different here, right?" Yeah. But I want to talk about that part of when Liz draws a line, right? Sure. Now, I'm guessing this, right? Your dad was a wrestler, so to be a state champion, it doesn't come just because someone's talented, or just there's a lot of discipline that comes with it too. So I'm assuming your dad had there was some discipline and there was some accountability part of it, and obviously that was a big thing that you benefited from being in the Marine Corps, and then specifically in recon, in that element, and you thrived in that. I mean, you volunteered to go where everyone wanted to train, and they lived to train, right? Yeah. So there was huge benefits in those times when you said you got out, when you were on an active reserve, if I followed you, was that the restlessness caused you to want to go back in. And I've talked to other veterans when they didn't, after 9/11, I know this is going to sound weird when I say it, but maybe it'll make sense, but correct me if I'm wrong. When they didn't get to go and they got left behind because of circumstances, it just infuriated them internally. Yeah. I mean, and so then it became this even bigger intensity and ambition to want to go. Yeah. Because guilt, shame, fear, or being left out. I mean, this is just some of the things that veterans have shared with me when that happened.
Oh yeah.
Or if they got injured and they couldn't go back.
Yeah.
There's a whole aspect of that. So if there's any of that, feel free to comment.
Yeah, I compare it to like that running back who is just won the Heisman, then gets in the NFL and breaks his leg. I felt like I had a lot left to go, and I wanted that to be my life. I wanted to stay in. I didn't want to get out. I loved it. When you get there, you get to grow your hair longer. Your missions change, and everybody's just eager in that unit, and it was just an awesome place to be. And I had my best friends. Now Walsh is gone, but I still had Gosnell and Carrillo, and we talked every single day. Carrillo mostly. He's Carrillo. He was that guy that drank nonstop, but if he was tumultuous with other people, he was every time we talked, we had a great conversation. I loved every bit of it. I tell my wife, like, hey, Carrillo's calling. How's he doing? Is he on the wagon? What's going on? Because he fluctuated, and I enjoyed it. And Gosnell, at the same time, he was going through the same dark path I was. But he was taking his prescribed medicine and drinking and just making poor choices. But he had a daughter. He's managing. He married a school teacher. But we fed off. He and I had to separate myself a little bit because when I got dark, he got dark. And yeah, and I have veterans all the time tell me, like, well, I didn't do what you did. And that's, if you want to drive me crazy, that's one thing to do, because nobody's service is any different whether you went in 400 missions or you were in Camp Lejeune as an admin clerk. Everybody's supporting the same mission. So it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what kind of trinkets you have on your chest or ribbons or anything else. Like that drives me crazy. Like, I could care less.
Sure.
And Andy Rooney from 60 Minutes once told me that the Purple Heart Medal was the I didn't duck fast enough award, and I laughed at that. And he's right. I mean, it's honorable, but I mean, you got hurt. That's why you got the medal. It's not a valor, a medal or something that's crazy like that. But we had our team. So when I met Liz, I was in a different spot. And I'd already now, I think a lot of people that are users as well, they start, once they clean up and they sober up, and this is what I compare it to, they start realizing the damage that they've done in the past. Well, then talk about a flood of emotion and your mind playing games, because now you know that all that hurt that you've caused, and now you're taking responsibility for that. Now you have to sort that out, and you really need to be in a good place to be able to start digging out of that hole. People think that you can sober up and then you're good to go. Well, no, it's not that easy. Like, it
just begins.
Yeah, it's just the start, and people look at that as a mountain that's really tough, and that's an excuse. Well, I made those excuses as well. I was hurt. One of my friends died. Two of my friends have died. But I was starting to get in a better place. I knew that where I needed to be, and I had this little 2-year-old. I was getting to see Ava more. My now going to be 16-year-old daughter. Things were getting better, and one day we're sitting at the store, and I get a phone call, and they called me, and Gosnell had gotten murdered. So that was a huge hit. He was met a guy in PTSD clinic, another Marine, out in North Chicago, and he went out to Schaumburg and met him, and they were drinking and doing other things, and they were messing with knives, as we kind of do, always like showing each other different tactical moves, doing stupid things, and had gone too far, and they stabbed him 21 times and murdered him, and the guy got away with self-defense because Gosnell had a knife as well, and they were playing or messing around. So not a scratch on the guy's body, but that's how Cook County operates. So, but I noticed at that point in my life that I was in a different place to receive that news. That was my lifelong best friend. That's the guy I joined the military with, went in the recon with, I lived with my whole life. It was a tough hit, but how I received that with the support system I had was night and day compared to when Walsh died or Ramey died. And I didn't have the opportunity or ability to use that as an excuse. I'm a dad. Like, you don't get to set your life in front of everybody else's as a dad. I've always put my wife and kids in front of me. So I did. I don't think I dealt with his death, and I still don't think I've really dealt with his death still.
But you also had your relationship with Liz. Not only, hands down, she may be different, but you also chose to be different in that relationship, which was the difference.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't like you had a daughter before, and you may have had good girls in the past, but if you're not open, you're not available, it doesn't matter how.
That's a loose term too. I'm still really not that open. But as our the counselor at the vet center is communication. It's tough for me to be vulnerable. Like it's hard for me to open up to her and give myself to anybody. In that aspect, I've never been. I mean, I was raised by a dad. Very, like you said, very disciplined, very strong-willed, but still told me he loved me every time I left the house. And it's, you're right, I did. I chose to get the help. I chose to keep my appointments. I took accountability, but I just had a great someone there to really help me, and that's what I needed. I think I needed that counterpart to hold me accountable for things that I did. She drives me crazy a lot of times, but that's relationships.
Sure.
And neither of us are perfect, but no, it's that support system, and I still had Carrillo, so I'd talk to Saul every day or every other day, and life was all right. Life was good for me. But Carrillo was struggling still. He was drinking a lot. But every time he had his daughter, he has a daughter named Aubrey as well, same as my daughter, and he would be sober. So this guy would drink nonstop. But if he had his daughter for 4 hours or overnight, he wouldn't drink at all. I'm talking alcohol dependent. He'd stay sober. He didn't matter what he went through. He would stay sober for her. He didn't put his daughter in front of it, or he didn't put alcohol in front of his daughter. His ex-wife called me and said he'd been divorced. Said, I met a guy. We're moving about 12 hours south, and I'm taking Aubrey with me. And I said, you're telling me this because you want me to tell Saul this or what? And she's like, I want you to call him after I tell him and talk to him about it. And he'd already been a bottle in at that point. He didn't take it very well at all, and for the next probably month, he drank nonstop. And she called me one day and said, you have to call Saul. I said, why? She's like, because I'm going to send Aubrey up there the whole summer. If I can call him and he's sober, I'll put her on a plane. He can have her the entire summer. And he would have loved that. So I called him and I told him, Saul, your wife's going to call you, your ex-wife. If you're sober, you're going to have your daughter all summer. And I know he'd be sober all summer. So this was the saving grace.
A win-win.
And she called and he wasn't. She didn't get on the plane and he died 2 days later. He drank himself just to the point where his body couldn't take it anymore. And that one hit me harder than anything. Like, it just destroyed me. Even though he lived so far away, like, I valued every conversation I had. This was the last guy that knows all of our intimate stories of missions and fun stuff, and just, it was the last piece of the puzzle. Now they're all gone. Now who do I get to talk to about that stuff? And it was a huge kick to the gut. And it was odd because guys know who I'd lived my entire life with. I'd gotten over that quicker, or dealt with it quicker than I did with Saul. And but I just didn't understand it. And what we don't with addiction is, if you're not addicted, you're not going to understand it.
Right.
Just like when I talk to somebody about being engaged in enemy fire, if you haven't been in that situation, you can understand and be copacetic as to the situation, but if you haven't been through it, you cannot relate with that exact feeling. Well, I couldn't relate with his feeling because I've never been dependent upon alcohol. And it was frustrating. It killed me knowing that, and each of them had children, So as a dad, there's nothing more important to me than my children. Mm-hmm. And I see that they've maybe put other things in front of there, and it just didn't settle well with me. I was mad about it. And I don't know, it kicked my butt. Mm-hmm. So after that, I got medically retired. My retirement went through during all of this. There's more damage on my brain than they had thought. So they put me individually unemployable, meaning I can't be employed by anybody. I have 2 fractured kneecap patellas are in pieces right now. I walk with forearm crutches about half the year. I've been off them for about a year and a half. I'm not sure what's going on, but normally when I have a spine disease, arthritis through the top of my feet up to my shoulders. It's all through my body just from jumping out of planes and just putting my body through hell, and then injuries. And I said, with all this time on my hands, like, what is my purpose? I know my purpose is a dad,
sure,
and a husband, and I love that purpose. Mm-hmm. But you have to have a purpose outside of that. You have to have your own purpose. Mm-hmm. And I decided I wanted to rebuild relationships, especially in this town that I loved, and all these people, and even some people will never talk to me again, and I understand that, but at least I know that I'm doing good. Mm-hmm. So I vowed just to give back, and that's all I do now is try as much as possible to give back to the community and help the community in any way, and help people that need help. And then maybe one day these people that hate me or dislike me or are so mad with me or don't even care anymore can find some kind of forgiveness, in their mind, being like, maybe he's not, total scumbag, and maybe just kind of realize that people change. And
so when you talk about wanting to give back and wanting to help and finding purpose in wanting to help, is there, and I know that, similar to myself, there's going to be very seldom, is there going to be someone that I'm going to, if I can help them, I'm going to try to help them, sure. Right? And then obviously there's even certain individuals that I find, that are certain people from my past, even more so, I'll have a tendency to do what I can, if I can, with that. But is there a particular group of segment of the population that you're even more so trying to make a difference, trying to shine some light into?
I hold veterans close to my heart. Sure. So that transition from this purpose of the military and people putting you on this pedestal, mm-hmm. For the greater good, whether you did any, no matter how, what avenue you served, the transition back to civilian life is tough because now you feel like you blend into civilian life. Mm-hmm. That's a very difficult thing to transition back into. You go through this extreme life back to a very subtle, mundane life, mm-hmm. and expect it just to be all right with it. Well, so I do tend to when I speak a lot to a lot of veterans, but my story relates to anybody that's gone through mm-hmm. loss or issues. So we just did 95 turkeys for Thanksgiving, and I donated to. A lot of them are veterans on hospice care. Mm-hmm. So, but I said if there's anybody on hospice care that's struggling that could use this help, I'll go to the vet center. I'll go to Miss Carly's. We donated turkeys to Miss Carly's. Mm-hmm. We feed the homeless, less fortunate. I'll go to the low-income housing and find some people that need help there, and I'll help them. It doesn't matter to me who you are. If you need help or if you're going through a struggling time, who's to put somebody else in front of you because you think a veteran deserves it more? I can appreciate veterans. I can thank them. Yeah. But I think everybody's got their own story. That everybody's, Well, a couple things that you said that I think are real interesting, and it speaks to where I was at, because part of my story was that when I was going through a dark time
in transition from my former life to what became my current life, right? One of the things that I discovered was men's work, and at that time in the Rockford area, in the Midwest, men's psychology, the men's movement was just starting. This was in the early '90s, and that helped me beyond words, this idea of understanding what was then later phrased as the male mode of feeling, and learning how to be able to go to another male and being able to have them hold that space, because there was no sexual tension, there was no sexual energy there.
Yeah.
And it was also great risk, because that was where prior that men were competition. They were individuals who, if you shared what your dreams were, they would use it against you. If you shared what your fears were, they could exploit that. And then learning how to discern who would be able to be safe. Well, then after going through that part of my journey, it was important for me to then be able to share that, not just with men, but then also with women, because there's this misnomer, I think, that females have, is that they're so good with sharing feelings. Just because people talk a lot doesn't necessarily mean they share a lot of feelings, right?
Very true.
Or there's this, that just because they're female, there's an ability to go into that vulnerable space, right?
Sure.
Because we can repeat a story, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going into that vulnerable space where growth happens. But growth happens because we're scared shitless.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a scary, dark place, and there's risk there of being hurt. I think of when you were talking, the impact of growing up and the impact of your parents' divorce. You were compartmentalizing things at an early age, thoughts and feelings, right? Sure. And then the things that you, as different traumatic things happened when you were deployed, then you went into the box just got, or the room where the box was just got bigger. And part of what I hear that you're saying is that you're giving individuals, maybe specifically men, but individuals in general, permission to talk about what they may not want to talk about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because some of your close friends who passed may not have taken that advantage.
Yeah.
Maybe it would have made a difference. I don't know.
Yeah.
I always want to say that, go to a professional, go to a counselor. But I also know that there's a lot of counselors that are just punching the clock. And to do the type of work that we're talking about doing, you have to have someone who's willing to walk with you in that darkness.
For sure, yeah.
So when you think about this idea of wanting to help, right, and part of one of the things that wanting to be able to share is that, we can definitely help by giving someone clothes and giving food, and we definitely need to do that for ones that don't have those things. And then there's this idea of being able to give to them hope and possibility and direction of how can they change their circumstance, right? How do they change internally their circumstance?
Sure.
What are your thoughts about that? About what do you do to be able to help model that for other individuals? Because that's clearly what you've done.
Yeah. I recently I was down in Miami 2 weeks ago speaking to NOVA. It's the Nurses Organization of Veteran Affairs. And I'm back to Miami in a month down at their TBI and PTSD clinic speaking to them.
Okay.
And just sharing the story. I gave you a really brief synopsis today, but I go into detail when I speak. And it, just like you're doing here, is you show these different levels to where childhood, could be good, could be bad, could be, middle of the road, which mine was probably middle of the road, but loved. And then this high, and then which a lot of people, go through in the military, and then that lull when they return, and then the hope that so I can relate with this, and there is a way to get better. There's something that I can find that I'm going to say is a coping mechanism, and I can do. When I would hold group over at the Vet Center, I had Beneath the Beard. We would all share our weekly struggles, just like Dan Petrie does with Fatherhood Encouragement. They always reflect on the week, share their struggles, and then in that group can talk about, you know what, I went through that. 9 times out of 10, somebody else has gone through something similar in situation and can offer what they did to cope with that time.
Right.
So when I share my story, I'm very candid, I'm very open, I'm very emotional, because it's something very important to me, and very when I share that story, anybody can relate, because there's something, whether it's divorce, whether it's childhood trauma, whether it's military, whether it's coming home and abusing alcohol and damaging relationships. At some point, most likely somebody's done one of those things. And then they can understand and reflect, and then find hope in doing something better with life, finding purpose. And I always tell people, it's like, you just have to have purpose. I don't care what that purpose is, as long as it's healthy. I mean, there's obviously anybody can abuse any aspect of life, sadly, but my purpose is what helped me. And a lot of people say, well, you shouldn't be talking about these missions or what you did. I'm not that World War II. We're different now. Where the guys used to go into the VFW and drowned into that dark bar, and that's how it was. And a lot of Vietnam veterans didn't have that outlet as well. And now this outlet is becoming clear, and these avenues to where you can share and get these things out, so that you're not struggling and have these little demons and embers inside. I always call them embers of anger. To dwell on. There are people that are sharing the exact same thing you're going through. And what I like to do is I just dive in the community. There's a children's trauma group that I'm with in District 100, or the Belvedere District. I think it's 105, 205? 100. District 100, yeah. So, and it's a group panel, and they go over childhood trauma. So if I can maybe help with I offer insight or a story, and it helps somebody, or I can contribute to the group, then I feel good.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that you said is, by sharing your story, you then also invite people to share their story, right?
Yes.
And main thing is, how can we be a good listener? And then beyond creating that space for someone to share, but I think that element of each individual person has to create that purpose for themselves, find their own thing. And maybe it's going to take some exploring, but
sure.
Find that purpose. And then you talked about that daily structure, right? And if that daily structure is movement, and depending on where that person is, and some discipline regarding what that is, about what you put in your body and what you don't put in your body, and those types of things, but creating that lifestyle, and then pursuing those things. What is that thing that's going to give me what's bigger than myself? I really appreciate, Ryan, everything that you've been sharing. If there was one thing as we get ready to wrap up today that you would want to share with someone, now this is going to come out during the holiday season, right? Yeah. During the Christmas season. If there was one thing that you wanted to share with someone, whoever may be listening today, what would you want to share with them?
Just help each other out. I'm a big believer in, it doesn't have to be monetary. Just open a door for someone, or load groceries, something simple like that. Just do a kind gesture. I mean, we live in a troubled city that seems to always report the bad stuff, but
sure.
Just appreciate the situation you're in, and always realize that somebody probably has it a little bit tougher. Yeah. And help each other out. So
that just reminds me. I wrote an article just yesterday, and I always talk about this idea about being a light in someone's darkness. And in there, this last time I talked about when we choose to open that door for someone. Not only are we being a light maybe in someone's darkness, but it allows us for our light to be brighter.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Because just like you said, it allows us to feel better about doing the next right thing, do the next life-giving thing,
Sure.
and also then help someone else too.
Yeah, it feels good. I mean, tell me the last time you helped someone, you're like, man, I really don't feel good about that.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't. It's almost like a guilty pleasure when I go and speak somewhere and I help something. It's almost like I'm kind of doing it because I get this feeling of happiness, and I don't think anybody's ever helped anybody and be like, man, I just don't feel good about that.
Why'd I do that? Ryan, thank you very much for being here. I would love to have you on again just to find out what you're doing and get more into some of your other experiences that you had. So,
Ryan, I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for being with us today and listening to Ryan Curry. He's involved with a handful of different organizations here in the community, and definitely if you take to note what he said, that regardless of where you're at, find that purpose within you. Reach out and talk with someone about what maybe that you may be struggling with in that darkness. Reach out and help someone, not only for them but also for yourself. Look forward to being with you next week. Thank you very much.